Azerbaijan's September 19th military operation into Nagorno-Karabakh resulted in tens of thousands of ethnic Armenians fleeing the territory. The enclave has been disputed for decades, and while it is internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, until now it had been governed by ethnic Armenians. So is Azerbaijan guilty of ethnic cleansing, as some of its critics suggest? Or is Baku just reclaiming its territory, as it claims? And will the conflict end with Nagorno-Karabakh, or is there a risk of further escalation? We'll ask the ambassador of the Republic of Azerbaijan to the United Kingdom, this week's headliner, Elin Suleymanov. Elin Suleymanov, ambassador of the Republic of Azerbaijan to the United Kingdom. I want to thank you for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for the invitation.
Azerbaijan's military operation into Nagorno-Karabakh, into the territory, has led to a mass exodus of 100,000 people or more. Almost the entire population of the territory, according to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, gives that statistic to us. This has now led to a humanitarian crisis among those who fled, with many suffering from severe malnutrition. Yet a day after the incursion, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev said his sources had, quote, punished the enemy. Who's the enemy here?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Mark. The enemy definitely are the troops of the Republic of Armenia stationed on Azerbaijani territory, the ones who brought misery not only to Azerbaijani side, but also to the same tens of thousands of Armenian residents who live there, who burst them into this conflict of ethnicity between Azerbaijan and Armenia and caused their suffering. Now, they're also, the enemies are also the people who led the separatist regime for a long time, and now they're in custody in Azerbaijan, who offered military strikes, ballistic missile strikes into the civilian targets into Azerbaijan. But people of ethnic Armenian background, our residents there, they are not our enemy. In fact, repeatedly Azerbaijan has reached out to them, urging them to stay, offering them citizenship, to become a part of diverse culture of Azerbaijan. It is unfortunate there's so many left. We hope that some of them will come back. Some of them have Russian passports, some have them Armenian passports, so they may not come back. But we do hope to have a normal life for both Azerbaijani and ethnic Armenian civilians. And also, by the way, the same person who leads UNHCR, High Commissioner for Refugees in Armenia, she also said that there were no credible threats to and maltreatment of the people who were living Karabakh region. So I think that's also important to note.
Let's talk about those civilians. You mentioned people who have contributed to the suffering of civilians. It seems to me that the civilians are the ones who are the primary recipients of suffering in this situation. Over 80% have left. UNICEF says 30% of those arriving are minors, and many have been separated from their families. The special representative of the World Health Organization says that new arrivals in Armenia need, quote, urgent emergency assistance. Given all of the suffering that this population has experienced now, was it worth putting all of these people in such a dire emergency state for this military operation?
That's an excellent question to the people who provoked this military operation, who always use these people as an excuse to cause suffering to others and to achieve their political goals. Let's step back for a second. Why is the population of Karabakh region of Azerbaijan is 100% Armenian up until recently, for the last 30 years? It's because this diverse region was completely ethnically cleansed. Karabakh and surrounding regions had about 1 million Azerbaijani ethnic residents. They were all cleaned up. They were all flushed out in 1990s. I worked with UNHCR. I was a witness to people arriving in horrible conditions. I mean, we do not want to do what Armenians have done to us. That's why we immediately offered them to stay.
I do want to focus on what's happening right now. It seems to me that there is a very clear practice of mistreatment here structurally that has to be accounted for. I mean, there's this report that was released last year that stated that there is a widespread state-sponsored practice of racial discrimination employed by Azerbaijani authorities against ethnic Armenians. This was just last year. President Aliyev in his speeches has made references to Armenians as dogs. How could I possibly believe, how could anyone possibly believe that Armenians, let me finish the question before you answer, sir. How possibly are we supposed to believe that Armenians are going to have their rights protected? How can Armenians themselves trust that their rights would be safeguarded when the government is using language like this and when there's such demonstrable examples of harm?
Well, let's put things into perspective. First of all, facts on the ground. Nobody called Armenians dogs. The soldiers who were killing Azerbaijani civilians were chased out of Azerbaijan. Those are occupation troops of the Republic of Armenia in Azerbaijan who have nothing to do with it.
Again, when we look at the joint report that was submitted to the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, it's also about public discourse by public officials that has been seen as a sign and a symptom of racial discrimination, referring to Armenians as barbarians, as vandals, as fascists. Again, the report didn't just talk about troops. It was talking about a systematic state-sponsored practice of racial discrimination against ethnic Armenians. How do you respond to that report? Again, not just an isolated case against troops, as you're alleging, but against ethnic Armenians in general.
By the way, those are reports, by the way, about discrimination and language within Armenia against Azerbaijanis. These two countries, since the breakup of the Soviet Union, were in a war, in a state of very dire conflict. There were massacres of Azerbaijani civilians. 1 million people were kicked out from their homes. Of course, the situation is tense. We hear every day very racially slurred references to Azerbaijanis in Armenia. Armenians use horrible language against it. But again, let's even move beyond the language and conversation. Armenians have invaded Azerbaijani territory and committed war crimes. We have not ever crossed the border of Azerbaijan.
Do you feel that the language that has been used by your country's authorities, not just your president, but other officials, has made the situation more or less tense? Do you feel like it's calmed the situation or escalated it?
Let me tell you this. Several days ago, President Aliyev spoke very clearly. He said, we do not hold local Armenian population responsible for the crimes committed by the separatist leadership. He said they're our citizens, just like everybody else. So I would suggest to look at the actions and also look at the offer we offered Armenians today to live with our society, to be a part of prosperity.
In December of 2022, your government began blocking the Lachin corridor, the only route connecting Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia, which led to severe food, medicine, and fuel shortages. The former chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Luis Moreno Ocampo, initially said through the blockade, a, quote, genocide is underway against 120,000 Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, he adds that Azerbaijan's military operation further adds to the definition of a genocide. How do you respond to the former chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court?
Mark, words genocide and all this are very heavy words. Let's not use them like this. This is clearly not a genocide. I mean, honestly...
Why is it clearly not a genocide?
Well, genocide is what happened in Rwanda. Genocide is what happened in Srebrenica. Here you have a conflict with the separatist movement. I mean, let me pause
you for a moment for clarity here. The definition of a genocide is not to be like Rwanda. The definition of a genocide under the Rome Statute is defined as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, including killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. When we talk about cutting off, severely cutting off food, medicine, and fuel, that seems to meet those conditions. So, again, we don't have to compare to other countries.
First, Mr. Rodney Dixon offered a very clear debunking of Ocampo's claims. So, I mean, this is a legal issue. It takes a long time. But, Mark, two things. The definition you described actually perfectly fits what happened to Azerbaijanis at the hands of Armenians. The complete destruction of our group and removing Azerbaijanis from the Karabakh region. What we offered from the very beginning to stay and to accommodate and to become citizen and to integrate. You don't do that to the groups you want to destroy. You don't sit down and have communications for 3 years to build water supplies and infrastructure projects and supply heating to schools for the group which you want to destroy. That's completely wrong. Now, on the Lachin Road, we did not block the Lachin Road. We established a border checkpoint. Every sovereign nation, including Armenia, wants to have a border checkpoint. We are very close with Turks. We have on the border of Turkey, we have a border checkpoint. What they didn't want to do is to make sure that whatever transit goes from Armenia to Azerbaijan undergoes a check, because what happened apparently, and you know now, and Armenians admitted to that in Karabakh, that the landmines were transported, Armenian troops were rotated, and weapons were coming into Azerbaijan. That's what we wanted to prevent. We did never want to prevent medicines, and by the way, it was always open for the medical transit by ICRC, and about 60 people a week were going back and forth for medical treatment. That's not genocide. Those are, again, Mark, we want to live in peace with Armenians. We are neighbors in the same region. We are very much alike. All kinds of accusations like that do not help long-lasting peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. That's what we need to focus on. We want to look at the future.
Some would argue that waiting 7 months to lift the blockade, despite a binding order from the International Court of Justice, also does nothing to help matters.
That is actually a misinterpretation of the order of ICJ. The order was referring
here's what the ICJ did say. They made a ruling that the blockade, quote, may have a serious detrimental impact on the health and lives of Nagorno-Karabakh's population. They ordered Azerbaijan to, quote, take all measures at its disposal to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo along the Lachin border in both directions. There was not unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo for 7 months.
No, Mark, because later Armenia actually appealed to the same court, demanding the removal of the border post, and the court refused to act on this. And the reason is because putting a border post on a border, just like the United States has, any other nation has it, and every sovereign nation has that right. Putting a border checkpoint is not an impeding of a transport. It's actually a normal practice accepted by the whole world. We are not different from the rest of the world. Armenians are not the only people in the world who cross the border. That's a very normal practice.
Then how do you account for the severe food, medicine, and fuel shortages?
That's a very good question, because Agdam Road, which goes into Azerbaijan, has been full with Azerbaijani trucks offering supplies to Armenians in Karabakh, and Armenian separatist leadership refused that on a racial basis. Now think about this, Mark. You would not accept medical supplies, flour, and hygienic supplies simply because it comes from people of different ethnicity. Speaking of racial, ethnic hatred, that's what it is.
So when was the Agdam-Kendi Road opened?
That was only opened after the end of the operation, because Armenians refused
at the end of the operation.
It.
But just to be clear, because I don't want the audience to somehow think that this road was open. It was open on August 31st, 8 months after the blockade began.
Because we offered to open it much earlier. The refusal came from the Armenians. They even put concrete blocks there. Now think about this in another way as well. The moment the operation ended, all the supplies went from Azerbaijan to there. You do not supply people with all their needs the moment if you're really committing something really terrible to them. By the way, we talked to Armenians in Karabakh. We talked to them all along. There were meetings of the delegations. An exchange of opinion was rather constructive. So I think in a way, all of this negativity which created around the world and irresponsible statements by people like Ocampo have created a trauma against the population among the population of ethnic Armenians in Karabakh. Unfortunately, many of them left. It's true. We never urged them to leave. Quite the opposite. We urged them to stay. We never wanted them to leave. We actually, Azerbaijan is open. We have a reintegration portal asking them to come and register and to come back.
Fair enough. Mr. Suleymanov, I want to thank you so much for your time and joining me on UpFront.
My pleasure. Thank you.